Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Nicole Frolic of Inflexible Me, and I am so very honored to be giving you guys this video today. This is my union roundtable with the Divine Masculine, Divine Feminine, and we cover a lot of topics today. In fact, we cover some very controversial issues of today. We are going to be talking about transgenderism, which is actually a topic I've really wanted to bring up on my channel. And I'm really pleased with the discussion today. We really open up the table and we go into some very much needed conversations around this topic. I think it's important that we are having these conversations and not shutting down the disbursement of our own ideas and us trying to figure out what's going on. The reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because I can see there is a lot of pain that people are going through, and we as a society, I don't think are addressing the pain in the ways that we could. I think we could be doing a lot better. And so we're going to be talking about that today. I'm also really happy to be joined by Justin Deschamps, Lisa Watson, Rebecca Barfoot, Benjamin Stone, and Michael Daniels today to discuss all of these wonderful topics. We're going to talk about the masculine feminine energies and what that means for you. We're going to talk about these stereotypical ideas of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. We're also going to discuss the rites of passage, where a boy becomes a man and a girl becomes a woman. This is something that is kind of lacking in our society, and a lot of different tribes and ancient civilizations were doing this. So we're going to talk about the importance of this, and is this something we want to bring back into our communities? And then, of course, at the end, we're going to talk about union and how you can understand your own personal experiences and what starts to transpire when you start to integrate the masculine feminine energies within your own self, and how that starts to mirror itself in your own reality, in your world, whether it's through your relationships or your opportunities or experiences. So thank you so much. This is a pretty long video. I've got timestamps down below if you don't have time to watch the entire 2 hours. There are topics stamped within the time, so if you need them, they're down there for your benefit. All right, everyone, thanks so much for being part of this video, and if you have any comments that you want to share, please do. I love hearing from you. I'm so honored for you to be sharing your journey with me on this channel and with anyone else who's watching and reading. Lots of love to you all. Enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back. We are here to do a union roundtable of the Divine Masculine and the Divine Feminine. If you haven't checked out the first 2 videos, as this is a 3-part series and this is part 3, then I highly suggest you check out part 1, which was a roundtable with the Divine Masculine, and part 2, which was a Divine Feminine roundtable. So today we have invited all of the guests who were in both videos to come back today to have a discussion on union, in how the masculine and feminine are working together to basically come into union. We're going to talk about it from an energetic point of view, and we're also going to talk about it from a biological incarnation point of view. There are a lot of different topics that we're going to cover today, and I'm really excited to have you all here. We have Lisa joining us. We also have Michael Daniels, Rebecca Barfoot, Benjamin Stone, and Justin Deschamps. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Hey there.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. The only person we're missing is Jessica Ulstrom, and she's really upset to not be here. One of her kids is really sick, but I know she was actually really stoked to be part of this conversation. So Jessica, you are missed, but I know your energy's here with us. So we have a lot of topics to cover today, but I thought we could start off with some of the basics, because one of the questions that really keeps coming up for a lot of people is, what does it mean to be a man, or what does it mean to be a woman when you take the stereotype versus the divine template? So since we started with the masculine first, why don't we start with the feminine? And anyone who wants to jump in here, by all means jump in. But what is your perspective on what it means to be a woman when it comes to the stereotype versus the divine template?
I'd really like to hear a man's point of view, if you want to know the truth.
Put the men on the spot.
Yeah, I think one of you men ought to jump in. I want to hear what you think the differences are.
Okay. Can I ask, what do we mean by divine template?
Meaning the original blueprint of the feminine energy, of what it means to be feminine.
In like a human earthly sense, or like in a grand archetypal sense?
That's actually a good question. I think just in a human sense, because people are really struggling with it on a human level. I know I've had some people say, well, what does it actually mean to be a man, or what does it actually mean to be a woman? I mean, we have these stereotypical ideas of what, we're kind of taught to believe, but then there's also this, which tends to be a little bit more of the wounded aspects of the energies. But then we have more of the wild energies of what I just kind of look at it as more of like an original blueprint.
Okay. Well, I'll cast the first stone, I guess, and just to explore the idea. And I don't necessarily have like a concrete answer, but if we're talking about a divine template in terms of like a universal archetype that all women embody, then I think the difference between the archetype and the stereotypical woman is, or female role, I should say, is the difference between maybe a cultural concept of what femininity is and what femininity is across the aggregate. So for example, when you're looking at different cultures, whether it's Americans, the Japanese, Polynesian cultures, African cultures, they all have a different version of what women or femininity is supposed to be. Okay. But if you average those out and you look for what are the common elements among them all, I think you have some pretty generalized things that we might be able to throw out there. And one thing, as I think about this real time is, women tend to culturally embody a nurturing role. They embody a supportive role. They embody a generative role. I mean, they arguably have the most important role in existence, which is to bring new life into the world and really nurture that life. So I would say, just in my initial attempt to try to identify what this divine blueprint is, I would say that the female role has the ability to be very receptive and accumulative when it comes to information, but also have the capacity to generate a lot. I mean, just from a psychological and neurological perspective, women have a greater average of neuroticism, so they have a greater sensitivity to negative emotion, which isn't to say that it's negative in a bad sense. What it means is that they're very receptive to information, and they tend to feel that in a more holistic right brain sense versus a man who tends to only feel what is articulated in their brain, and they have the ability to kind of suppress their emotions for evolutionary reasons. So yeah, that's kind of, I'll get the ball rolling in that sense. What do other people think about this?
Yeah, well, I'll just jump in really quickly so the audience is clear and that I make myself clear. We're not suggesting that everyone should be the same and that like all women need to be the same and all men need to be the same. Absolutely embrace your individuality. But I think there are some core elements of the masculine and feminine that, like you said, when you take the average across cultures, there's certain things that really stick out. So I don't want to by any means insinuate that all women are supposed to be one way and all men are supposed to be the other, because that I do not believe in at all. But I do believe there are some core elements there that really help distinguish, men and women. So Rebecca, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, this is such a rich, this is a totally rich question. I'm like going all over the place with that. So appreciate Justin starting us off, because it's wow. And I'm just, I guess from my own experience, that's the only thing I know, right, is as a woman, a creator. And that doesn't mean I don't have children. It's not that. But what is my experience of creation in my day-to-day life? What am I, like the birthing energy? And that's so right on about the, we're here to create, but is it always how we think it is according to our gender? And men are creators too, but that's how I relate to my, my feminine, like the divine blueprint, if you like, as a creator and the nurturer. But at the same time, that's not that's not a gendered thing. I mean, I can't speak for myself necessarily as a male, because men are creators and shepherders and nurturers of life also. So just bringing my feminine perspective on that, I mean, creation as an artist or a nurturer of life and others or a supporter. I can't distinguish it by gender though, so that's where I'm getting.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's such a difficult, that's why I think a lot of people are confused about it, because they don't know where their role is. And maybe that's more of the question of like, what's my role as a man, or what's my role as a woman? Not that those roles don't overlap and merge with each gender, but Ben, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to add in that, one, I think the feminine is an evolution. And secondly, although we're probably going to talk about it, and I know we have some perspective on this, I think we're talking about feminine and masculine versus gender. And I never thought I would actually state it that way, but yeah, I think when you identify with the specific energies of masculine and or feminine, then you have to refer to what Rebecca was speaking about, is that she couldn't define it as a gender because of it being we're both creative. Well, we're both creative, I think, because of the feminine. And so, so myself as a man, when I access my feminine, I am then therefore nurturing and creative, et cetera, which is what Justin, laid out a lot of details to. I get to experience in my work a lot of culture, people from different countries. And it is quite fascinating to me to observe what the feminine is, or the gender female is here in North America, as opposed to the ones he listed, Africa, Asia, etc. Because, and that puts us into a really interesting place, because is there a fundamental basis, like what Justin said, that, is the common theme all the way through the tapestry that makes the feminine? But if I was to compare the way, feminine is, and I'll use this term loosely, evolving in North America as opposed to someone out of Africa, then I would say that if I was to look at that and make that judgment, I'd say, geez, we're like way off base here. We are, we're doing a lot of fake feminine here, and we're usurping. Here's what I believe. I believe that we're being forced to usurp the most common and comfortable aspects of ourselves in the gender of feminine or masculine. So again, it's like you said, we're not telling anyone to not be an individual or express themselves, in a very uniform manner. But at the same time, I feel as though there is a unnecessary push to make feminine more masculine, or make females more masculine, and make men more feminine. So those are some things that I certainly consider in this discussion.
Well, here are my thoughts on it as we're talking it out, is that just from my own experience is that the more, and I think we touched on this in the Divine Feminine Roundtable, the more in touch I got with my feminine side, the true femininity of that really softer, nurturing, receptive, intuitive side of myself, a little bit more kind and open, willing to be vulnerable. The more I got in touch with that, the more I got in touch with my wild masculine side, and the more aggressive parts of me, of my masculine, started to calm down, and I started to put more focus into using my mind to strengthen my mind to think more logically, and to provide structure around my day, and to willing to take action that was really supportive to my heart's desires. And so I find that when we actually, like you said something really key there, Ben. You said, like, when we're being taken away out of our comfort of what we're naturally comfortable with in our energies, we're being asked to kind of go away from that. And I do find that I agree with you that when we start to come back to that place of what we've always known, even though it may seem foreign at first because of all of the things that we've grown up understanding, what it means to be feminine or masculine, that we start to uncover and rediscover those parts of us naturally and inherently. They just start to come out when we naturally start to connect with them.
Yeah, I'm asking myself, why is this a question? Like, why are people asking what is our role when it should be what comes naturally to you? It's just it's all this idea of like we have to be different, or we have to be more masculine, or men should be more feminine, like Ben said. And I think that the roles that we have are what come naturally to us. You know, some women have more masculine aspects to them, and as some, you know, and just the opposite. So it's like, why do we have to put ourselves in this box and play out this role that what society thinks that we're supposed to be doing? It's like, it's okay to just be you. It's okay to just be a little bit more feminine if you're a male, or a little bit more masculine if you're a woman, and not try to fit into this particular role, and allow those energies to merge naturally within you.
And there's the rub, exactly. Because if we are doing just what you said and not having agendas and pushing, like, you know, I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but, you know, I read another article today about, you know, pushing, you know, 5-year-olds into, you know, a gender reassignment in the UK. 2010 there was 20, and somewhere in the ballpark of 2000 and 2018. And so the question begs is, are we evolving so dramatically that 5-year-olds are realizing they're showing up in the wrong body, or is there an agenda? And so, you know, that's something to be considered.
So maybe I can jump in here. We talked about a lot of things, but I think what we need to get back to is some of the basics. You know, we're talking about divine energies. You know, everything's energy, everything. You know, and I'm sure Ben will agree with me on the quantum side, but with energies, there's everything. There's polarities, there's negatives, there's positives. Our lives move between these polarities. You know, our physical, biological bodies are, for the most part, one polarity, one form, one gender, male or female. Now, we're not going to get into all the other in-betweens right now, but for polarity's sake, the biology is one or the other. The energy, the spirit that animates us, now that's where the fun gets. That's both male and female. And that's where, you know, we come to this world, we come to this earth to learn lessons. And, you know, what greater way to create all sorts of crazy polarities is to have your left side being magnetic, the feminine side, the right side being male gender, more of a transmitter. You know, these energies move and create polarities. So as a biological entity, as a male, you know, I get to interact with females, and oh my gosh, all kinds of crazy polarities can occur where your lessons are sparked. You know, this universe is nothing but information. You know, our world comes in through a quantum state of consciousness and information that manifests matter. But the key here, and the spice of it all, even though we're biologically one gender for the most part, the energies that animate us can be any spectrum of male and female, one way or the other, and that's what brings us our uniqueness, you know. And you can just close your eyes and you can imagine the spectrum of the population. You know, you think about certain women athletes that are very manly. They have more masculine traits, softball players, what have you. You have men, on the other hand, that are very effeminate. You know, it's these energies within them that are manifesting certain biological expressions through an infinite number of polarities where we learn our lessons. Um, and I'll just shut up on it and see what you guys have to say about that.
I'd like to input more to exactly what you said from a quantum biology standpoint. I have not done the research in terms of what I'm about to say, but so I'm throwing it out as speculation here. But it is true that it does come in through consciousness, but we understand, or we believe in quantum biology, that it was photons and radiation that evolved us. And so from the quantum wave, the radiation that comes down into the physical manifestation of 3D perfectly and accurately produces the physical manifestation of the energies that are coming in. So yes, it's easy to see that as a masculine driven blueprint, that the radiation that comes down and continues to come down for me in my reality continues to make me look the way that I am. And so, yes, to your point, Michael, there are women that are more masculine, but they're also not saying, I'm more masculine, so therefore I should have an appendage attached to my body. And likewise, there are men who are more effeminate, but they're also biologically, from the quantum field, being produced exactly perfectly. Not going into all the like equations and stuff, but for me to question that the science in the way that the photons and the blueprint are manifested in the physical is somehow false, and that the spirit is suddenly saying, I want to be the other gender, I think is not correct. And here's why. I believe that if I wanted to express as more of a feminine energy, which I completely think there's nothing wrong with doing, it doesn't mean that I need to get breast implants and follow society's perspective of what then the female gender is. Like, it's so bizarre out there to me that we're smashing down genders.
You know, I mean, that's an extreme. I mean, you know, what you're talking about, Ben, you're going off on a tangent that is a very small portion of the population, you know, 1%, 2% at best. But obviously those individuals who are engaging in certain feelings to that extreme for changing sex, I mean, those feelings are intense. But I think for more of a mainstream discussion, the bottom line is that we have these energies swirling around in us so that we can enjoy the different polarities of life and go about the lessons that we need to learn in trying to balance those energies. Now that's the real key is you know, you hear the term 0 point. You know, what the hell is that? You know, it's neutrality. It's taking the energies that are within us, unplugging from the frenzies that we all experience during the day, the chaos that we're experiencing during the day that knocks us off our foundation, that affects our energetic state, that cuts us off from divine energies, you see. and that's what's most important, I think, is that, I mean, I spent the majority of my life completely veiled until just less than 3 years ago. I was awoken overnight, crazy stuff. I can still remember being veiled and not knowing a thing about what we're talking about. But I mean, we can spend the next 2 hours talking about all the dances that the masculine and the feminine does and ways to improve it. The real key, I think, is the neutrality, the neutral, finding a neutral observer stance where you don't become triggered or upset when your views are stepped on by somebody and you get angry and you lower your vibration. That's what society has been polarized on purpose by an agenda to keep us in a low vibration, to completely cut us off from our divine energies. Now I'm assuming most of the people who are watching this video are either there or they're close, or they want to be there because they've learned some things about, hey, there is something to spirit. What can I do to increase those energies? And it's the balance of these energies within us that puts your body in a state of vibration that allows the divine to come into you, so that you don't have to think about what you do. You have divine intelligence and infinite intelligence coming from your heart center, versus all this analytical reasoning where we're stuck in, that's finite. But again, I'll open the floor on more discussion on that.
Well, here's the thing, because it can get very convoluted very fast when we start to talk about the energies and all of that. So let me try and see if I can bring it down. And actually, Justin, I'm going to throw it over to you because I think you might have some really good information here on it. For instance, through different cultures, through ancient civilizations, when a boy was becoming a man, there were certain ceremonies or rituals that the men did with the boy and took him through to celebrate his crossing the threshold into manhood, as well as with women. So if we bring it back down to there, where are we, what are we missing now in today's society for men? Because a lot of, I think some of the confusion is, I was talking to a male today who, he's like, I don't even remember when I became a man. I don't even know if I am, he doesn't remember that threshold. So why don't we talk about it from that point of view? Because that's really tangible and understandable to what that means when we had all of these past cultures and ancient civilizations who had these rituals and ceremonies in place. Justin?
Sure. One of the initiation rites of a lot of tribal cultures is initiating the young boy. Usually it happens right after puberty. And from what I've been able to gather, there seems to be a pretty consistent theme, which is that the young boy is to be initiated into facing the unknown and learning how to rest on, have faith in their strength and confidence to effectively develop courage. And one of these initiation rites involves taking the young man, bringing him into a cave and having him spend a night in total darkness and isolation. And often what happens is it's a very, intense experience. But what occurs is that the men in the tribe encourage him to face that. He will develop and find an inner strength. What tends to happen is that the young man will cease to be in an infantile state and will become more an adult. And I think that the transition from an infantile to adult, or child to adult, from immature to mature, that's really what's at the heart of these initiation rites. Same thing for women, depending on where you look in culture. Now, it's some cultures, though, those initiation rites aren't there for women. But just to speak to the concept for a moment, a person, to use the hero's journey is a really good example I like to refer to a lot because it's pretty well known. The hero is doing well in his little village. He thinks everything's great. We'll use The Lord of the Rings. I think it's a pretty good story, a great example of this. Frodo, he's in the Shire, everything's happy, great, his life is perfect. then Gandalf comes in and thrusts this peril at his feet, this challenge at his feet. And he has to go into the world because he loves his village so much, and to protect his village, his life, and his people, to go face his danger that he just doesn't know he's capable of facing. But each trial, each hurdle, each initiation proves to himself that he actually has the ability to handle these things. And I think the concept of adulthood, whether we're talking about masculine or feminine, is the ability to face a reality that you don't necessarily want to face. You know, as children, we live in a very sheltered environment where our parents kind of keep the bad things away from us. But an adult has to learn how to face reality as it is. And I think there's a reason why that's the case, because in a grand spiritual evolution sense, we're constantly going to have to make and contend with the unknown. So we have to develop the ability to not only deal with the unknown, but actually love and embrace the unknown, and have faith in the fact that we'll develop strength in the process. So from a cultural standpoint, there's a lot of initiation rites related to men basically becoming the more traditional role that you would think of: protectors, resource gatherers, things like this, soldiers, warriors, because men possess a physical body vehicle that tends to lend them, gives them opportunities or benefits or skill sets that would be more conducive for that would give them a better opportunity to do that. Doesn't necessarily mean that women can't do that, but it's one aspect of the masculine tradition. The feminine tradition involves a whole bunch of very different complex initiation rites, depending on the culture. And I think one of the reasons why is that, unlike men, women have a built-in initiation. You know, as soon as you become fertile as a woman, and if you decide to have sex with somebody, you're going to be forced into a situation that you don't necessarily have a whole lot of control over. And you're going to have to contend with the unknown, very similar to the boy I was mentioning earlier has to contend with his fear of darkness and the unknown. So the feminine rites, both, whether we're talking about masculine or feminine rites of initiation in cultures across the board, they tend to give people knowledge and skills so that they can deal with whatever gender role they're going to play out in their particular culture. You know, in Latin cultures, we have quinceañera, I believe it's called, where it's the 15-year-old birthday of the woman. She's becoming a woman. She's flowering. She goes from the little girl, but she's actually treated like a woman. There's dancing. There's things like this. There's presentation rites. So, I think these traditional roles are speaking to a nature. And this is, to get back to the original question, this is what I was thinking of hearing all the responses. And I really appreciate everybody and what they were saying, because it helped me educate my own kind of thoughts on this. I think if we ask the question, to answer the question, what is the role, the divine blueprint that maybe we can strive to find in our lives to live a more fulfilling life for ourselves, is to ask the question, is there a fundamental nature that we have? And if by embracing that nature, can we live the highest quality and most fulfilling life possible? I think that's pretty fundamentally true. But to give an example, we are biological beings. We need food, we need water, and we need air. So you might argue that that is part of our nature. If you try to fight that nature, what happens? Life gets really hard, doesn't it? Similarly, if we can extend that concept to include gender, physical sex, if the gender concept has been a little watered down, I'm talking about physical sex, masculine physical features, feminine physical features. I would argue that those features limit what you can do in life. I might want to have a child one day, but no matter how hard I try, I'm not going to be able to become pregnant. Similarly with a woman, no matter how hard she tries, she's not going to be able to inseminate the egg of another woman, at least not yet. Maybe that time will come with technology and things like this. So that's what I would say to answer the question, what should men and women be doing when they're trying to figure out how to be men and women in this world? Ask yourself, what is your nature? And can you progressively and with greater accuracy just simply live out your nature and carve out your own sense of masculine and feminine? And I'll leave this with one last statement, which is, that there's a difference between cultural norms and what tradition has taught us and what you choose to express in yourself. Just because a woman decides to wear pants doesn't mean she's any less of a woman. That very concept of pants being for men is an arbitrary distinction that we decided to promulgate through tradition and culture and collective choice. So I like to answer that question by saying, well, what can we do as individuals to embrace our nature? What is that nature? And how does that limit our possibilities? And instead of trying to fight the limits, because in most cases it doesn't do you any good besides drive you crazy, how about we embrace the nature that we've been given and live that out till its fullest?
Yeah. I mean, Justin is dead on there. Know thyself. We're all down here unique incarnational selves to learn our own unique lessons. There's so many people today, again, knocked off their foundation. They're struggling, trying to find answers to have things make sense. And they're looking for all the answers in someone else. They're looking for someone else's answers. They're not looking at what their own inner self needs to learn, their answers. What you seek is not going to be in the depths of others. It's going to be in yourself. Know thyself, because everyone's here unique to learn their own unique lessons in their own incarnation upon this plane until we go off somewhere else. And Justin is dead on.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You said what I was thinking, but much more eloquently. I mean, just that we need to embrace who we are and not worry about what society's trying to tell us who we are. And I know this whole thing with people changing genders and the 5-year-olds and the 14-year-olds being able to have treatments even without the parents being able to intervene. I mean, there's a lot of this coming up, and I would like to discuss that a little and get all your input on that. But what I really think is going on is an agenda, and through the foods that we eat and the chemicals in the environment, I think that there's definite like cell mutation going on, because it seems to be something that is just rampant. It's happening more and more often, and it just doesn't seem natural.
Well, we're energetically compromised, and it's on purpose. Much of the processed food industry is so full of crap that just messes up our entire body system. The toxins in the environment, the media coming at us, producing fear and anger and polarizing individuals. You talk about the transgender side, those individuals, my heart goes out to them deeply, because their struggles are so deep that much of that population, 50% or more, attempt to commit suicide. 33% or more are successful at it, because the inner struggle, the inner turmoil within them is so intense, and it brings about such shame in a lot of folks. That is, unless they just go with it. You see those that they have the issue and they're just out and they're open and they're living their lives, learning their lessons in it. But the struggle is those who can't deal with those energies. The struggle is so intense. It's that inner energies that animate the body that is creating the struggle, that most folks don't know this. Your psychologists, your doctors, they're all trying to treat this with chemicals. You have males who say they're women. Well, yeah, energetically, they incarnated with a higher amount of feminine energies that are animating their male body, and that creates an inner turmoil that is just horrendous. And they don't know it, because most of the population has no idea that spirit really exists. The belief system's not there. They've been so knocked off their foundation, they can't feel it, touch it. Their own veil, their own personal veil, that they come in with the forgetfulness, so that they have their struggles, they live their messy lessons. It really is a lot easier, I feel, for those who have these struggles to deal with those struggles if, one, they understood and had a belief system of spiritual energies. Most of them have no clue. They're veiled from it. And when one finally starts to believe and have a belief system that, hey, yes, I'm a male, but I'm overwhelmed with these feminine energies, or the opposite, you have a female, that I'm male, because of these energies are predominant. If they can start understanding that really is what's going on with these various polarities of spiritual energies, it may help them deal with the situation in greater detail, as opposed to trying to go to someone to say, fix me. This is their struggle to figure out how to balance those inner energies that are creating that turmoil. And most are failing at it because they're seeking the answers outside of themselves. And a doctor who wants to treat it, because the only way he knows how to treat it is to give a hormone or something, you see.
Well, let's jump into that topic because it seems to keep approaching itself to the surface. I do want to get back to, please remind me, because I do want to get back to this idea of rites of passage for men and women in today's society. I think it's really important. I think it's something we should be talking about and embracing. But since we're talking about, we'll get back to that. Let's talk about the Justin, you were talking earlier, just before we went live, about gender as a social construct, transgenderism that's coming through very, very predominantly, more so in the last few years. And let's talk about that, because my stance on it is that I think that we're really failing people as a society who are going through this. I think we're severely failing them. And I think the reason why we're failing them is because we're being pushed to treat it as simply a physical solution. And we're not taking enough time to understand the mental, emotional, and spiritual issues underlying all that. We know that, especially anyone who's in an awareness of their own spiritual nature, we understand how energy manifests. It starts on the spiritual level and it goes through the emotions and then the mental, and then it manifests here on the physical. So why as a society are we pushing physical surgery that people can never reverse to the point where they can reclaim their body as it was originally, before we are actually asking the bigger questions and addressing the more emotional and mental issues, especially since the information that's coming out now is showing that if we're really truly wanting to connect with the people who are going through this with their pain, why are we then not taking notice of the fact that the suicide rates are not dropping but actually increasing when they transition? We're missing something there.
And I can answer. And I can answer that question. It's because the struggle is so horrendous. The internal turmoil is so horrendous that those individuals are so knocked off their foundation. They're so veiled from all of spirit that could give them the clarity they need. They seek their answers outside of themselves in the medical facility, in the medical arena, that doesn't address the spirit. They address the biology. And, they're benevolent folks. They go into medicine to heal, to care. They're compassionate. They want to solve the issues of these individuals who are coming seeking their help. I have no other way, but I need to be this other gender. Fix me. And obviously they are very willing, thinking they are performing benevolent acts, to create all sorts of ways to alter one's gender. I mean, they're getting pretty damn good at it, and that's solving some of the angst that these individuals are having, but it's not solving them at a soul level.
Well, here's the thing, Michael. From what I understand from the reading that I'm doing, and anyone else jump in if you've got more information on this as well, but from what I'm understanding from people who have gone through the transition and have regretted it, they're sharing their experiences with the medical community and how they're being treated. Now, there is a standard of care practice that is supposed to be implemented, but it's merely a suggestion. It's actually not enforced. where you talk about people who are wishing to transition, that they go through 2 years of understanding, going through therapy to really get in touch with the emotional aspects, the mental aspects. A lot of times people who are transitioning, there's some level of abuse, whether it was physical, sexual, of nature, mental. There is depression involved a lot of the times, but none of this is actually getting addressed. And more people are starting to come forward who've actually transitioned and speak about the basically the malpractice of the medical community in not actually doing their job, because the standards of care are simply a suggestion. They're not enforced, and they're actually in favor of protecting the doctors who perform the surgeries and not the people who are having the surgeries. So
Right.
there's that we have to talk about.
They're addressing the biology, and they're not addressing the spirit. And what I will guarantee you, if you do a poll, if you really delve into that community, very, very, very minute percentage of that population is going to have any knowledge of or concept of spirit being able to help them in these issues. Most of them are so polarized and knocked off their foundation, their body's energetic state is so fucked up that they're totally cut off from spirit and the clarities that you and I are talking about. It's heartbreaking, you know. I challenge anybody to do the research to find out who is really addressing the spirit needs of these individuals, as opposed to working to address fixing the biology. That's the mistake.
Well, this is being handled the same way everything is being handled, because our society right now is they want to engender fear and control. So whether it's, you know, a heart condition you have or a weight problem or anything, it's all handled the same way. It's about, you don't have control, everything's outside of you, let other people take care of you, you know, just like Michael said. And we're not there yet. You know, we're not, society has not moved to this place where it's about, you know, self-healing and know thyself and looking at things on a spirit level. I mean, the whole system is fucked up, clearly.
I mean,
in all regards, across the board.
Layers of the onion, absolutely. Across any spectrum, you could take that same scenario that we just talked about and mirror it to 1,000 other issues. It's all part of to knock us off our foundation, to remove us from
but the problem here, though, is that we're talking about irreversible surgery. Okay, something that someone will have to live with for the rest of their life. You know, as a woman, if I want to get breast implants, I can take them out, and sometimes it doesn't go the way I want, but it's not as severe as an actual gender surgery. Justin, I know you were you actually put out something on Facebook today about gender as a social construct. Do you want to talk about that and the response you got?
Surely. Firstly, I'd like to say this is a really complicated issue. So there's a whole lot I'd love to talk about transgenderism. In relation to your question, I had put out a little meme image about the principle of gender as it relates to electrical systems. And this is the Hermetic principle of gender, which, for those who aren't familiar, effectively states that for every effect that we observe in reality, there is a gendered cause. There's a masculine and feminine component coming in to beget or create that effect. And if to give an example of that, when you are receptive to information, you're listening. That's a feminine quality. It's receptivity. When you're speaking, that's a masculine quality. When you listen to somebody speak, you're receiving information. Okay, so the information is masculine in that sense. Your mind is the feminine component. When you generate knowledge, that's the child, that's the effect. So this concept of gender, the principle of gender at a purely archetypal philosophic concept, is just simply the descriptive power of how two things come together to create something new. Now, because of various systems, whether it's universities or new ways of thinking. I happen to think it's a lot of the Marxist postmodernist ideology that is trying to like blow holes in kind of the philosophic substrate that we use to underpin our reality. They're trying to like destroy these distinctions and say, well, you know, gender is a social construct. And normally when you hear that term, the way it's used in context is, oh, well, you know, Justin, you just said you're a man. Don't you realize gender is a social construct, which means it doesn't exist. So why are you even paying attention to it? But that's a fallacious argument, I would say. If I'm saying gender is as a principle, the fact that two things come together to generate something new, you might not like what the words I use, but the principle itself is valid, and you can see it everywhere. So that's what was happening today, and I think there's a reason why there's a rise of transgenderism alongside a rise of what we might call kind of pandemic gender confusion. And I think it's because as a society, we've, you know, answering these questions about what gender is, what masculine and femininity is, what are our roles, as okay, I just lagged for a second. I wanted to make sure I was back. Answering these questions is something we tend to do. So let me address the transgender for a moment. So the transgenderism, or the ability to reassign your sex as a concept, as a procedure, as a psychological treatment and a medical treatment, is based on the presupposition, which is ironic because it's actually a spiritual presupposition, that a person can actually be a different gender or sex than they actually are biologically. But that claim has never been actually proven. It's this idea, it's a theory. Nobody really knows, or more to the point, nobody's taken the time to ask whether or not to find out whether or not that question's true. Some people are certain, well, that's insane. And, you know, that's the more, I guess you could say, traditional kind of perspective. Some people are certain, well, that's clearly the case. But you don't have a lot of like things to chew on to say, oh yes, this is definitely what's happening. So to your point, Nicole, you know, if somebody goes to a doctor or a psychologist and said, hey, listen, I feel like I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, the psychologist will say, okay, that sounds good. So do you want to get gender reassignment surgery then? And they just assume that that is the truth. And then from a treatment perspective, so the medical system and psychologists are trying to make people, they're trying to impart well-being onto people. So you have somebody who's in a not well state saying, hey, I would get well by reassigning my surgery. Is that effective? And the statistics show unquestionably that it's not effective, that, you know, suicide rates spike tremendously. A lot of people end up regretting the surgery. Depression, lots of problems persist. People have relationship issues. They have jobs issues. I mean, there's tons of issues. And we could certainly say that some of those issues are because of oppressive society and maybe transphobia. That might be the case. I have no doubt that that's probably happening. But I think at a deeper level, what's happening psychologically is that, as to your point, Michael, that there's what I would call a schism in consciousness. I'll incorporate the spirit and human fleshly mind together. Because as far as I understand it in my own research, and I could hardly claim to have perfect knowledge in this, who you are as a divine blueprint, to kind of use that term, it has to express itself and articulate itself in your life. So from a psychological perspective, the way that we embody the gender roles that we get is a slow biasing process over many, many moments across time that eventually get to the point where you kind of embody your gender role, and then you express that in some sexual fashion. And that usually is what you might call like a general kind of initiation for expressing your sexuality. So if we don't understand the underlying mechanisms that allow somebody to consciously see themselves as one gender role or another, then willy-nilly applying medical treatments that aren't really effective are only harming the person and promulgating a false concept in society that ultimately doesn't have a good impact as far as improving well-being.
Yeah. You know, and you know, I'll add again, you know, we're all down here living our little messy dance of lessons, you know, believe and or choose what one will. Free will doesn't matter. Lessons, your lessons still, you know. And that's another part of the messy dance that we come in our incarnation. We come here for lessons. Usually the messier the better. and some more difficult. The ones we're talking about are extremely difficult. It's saddening. People are losing their lives because the struggle is so intense, the inner struggle that they don't know how to address. They seek the answers outside, and they're never going to address the true struggles until they finally have a belief system that there is something divine, there are divine energies, we are incarnated beings that carry thousands of lifetimes of male and female, and these energies get conserved at one extreme or the other. You know, I think the incarnational energies that come into us may have a predilection toward more feminine than masculine, regardless if they incarnate in a feminine or masculine biological vessel. And again, you know, it's the spice of life. You know, if we all came in here with our veils opened and we knew everything that we were talking about, we had all the answers, we didn't have any struggles, we wouldn't learn anything to feed the insatiable thirst for knowledge that this universe has.
Rebecca, what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, the transgender, I think it's really tough without a representative transgender person here to help educate us. So that feels like the nice to me, to make a blanket statement about it. Or, you know, what if that is somebody's journey to go through the hell realm and go through this experience? And maybe, you know, my client work, I often see that people come in to undertake very hellish, from my perspective, hellish journeys. So they're clearing something out of the collective. I mean, this is from a more cosmic viewpoint. I'm not saying that's true for everybody going through whatever their experience is in the transgender role. But there's so much more at play here. And who am I to say that that's, you know, I don't want to take that journey from them. And I'm not negating what's been said here too. It's just such a, as we've said, a very, it's sticky. It's really sticky. And yes, there's an agenda there, but what about the people that I know who seem happy and well adjusted and better adjusted after they've had a surgery? I don't know. But I do, you know, I agree with Michael. We come here as spiritual beings learning all these lessons. So, and if they're not awakened, maybe this helps them awaken. I don't know. It's tough.
I think that, you know, this isn't, I think this is actually, you brought up something, you know, like, who am I to discuss this? And I think that we all have a voice in this. And just because we're not going through it doesn't mean that we don't have some sort of semblance or understanding of some of the more general concepts. Of course, once you go through an experience, you're the ultimate knower and teacher of that. I do believe that there are successful transitions, and that's great. But I think we're missing the fact that there are people who aren't transitioning and it isn't what they want.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And
so where are we failing? Where are we screwing up here as a society? That because it's a very dramatic change. You know, this isn't a small change we're talking about. And it doesn't just impact that person's life, it impacts their family, it impacts their loved ones. You know, everyone goes through this with them. And so if we can avoid the painful aspects, and obviously, you know, that when I say that, I don't mean that none of us should be going through pain, but I mean unnecessary pain in a sense of, we're missing something here that is not getting addressed. And I do believe part of it is a deeper agenda here. I feel that there is, well, with anything, there's negative and positive. And I do believe that there is a negative agenda behind here that doesn't have the people who are transitioning in their best interest. It's more to create more confusion here and not actually heal the issues at hand. And so that's more of what, for me as a human, I want to address what we're not actually addressing. And I think it's such a tender topic because there's so much pain behind it. But if we don't have these conversations, we're not gonna figure it out together. And I think that's one of the problems is that there's a suppression on this conversation because we don't want to hurt or offend anyone. But we're never going to truly understand what's going on here if we don't have open conversations with hopefully the intent of finding the healing aspect and the part that's going to benefit all, and not with the intent of putting anyone down or making anyone feel like they're not human because they're going through this experience.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, Nicole, you're raising some wonderful points, but you know, I'll counter this. This is more simple than you realize, and it's because the individuals who are going through these struggles, they don't understand the knowledge that we have. They don't understand the knowledge of the soul being spiritless, but having many incarnations as one or the other gender. All they're all coming from that experience of the biology that they're cut off. That's all they can experience, and they're squealing and they're screaming and they're asking for help to fix me, change me, because they don't understand these other aspects that we're talking about. And again, you know, the healthcare industry is not coming in from this point of view. If they are, I would like to know about it, because I'd like to see it expanded to these individuals who are suffering these sufferings. You know, I feel I've got a lot more insight in this than most, just because of the things that have come to me. But you know,
I wonder. I mean, it seems to me when we're talking about the genesis of this huge issue, coming back into the initiation rite that we talked about at the beginning, which is so huge, so hugely lacking within our culture at large. So, as Justin mentioned, going into the womb of the mystery in order to discover who we are, and as Michael's saying, you know, get reconnected to the spirit when we're young. We're young. We're still adolescent. So not just the burgeoning of our sexual capacity, but the birthing of the heart and the wisdom and the divine connections above and below to the cosmos and to the earth and the greater unity of our community. So when I look at all the, you know, neurotic tendencies that we have, isn't that the main? It just seems to me that this is one of the main issues that we have facing us, and to look at it from that perspective, as we started to, the beginning is so rich, the womb of going back there.
Ben, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Well, I was listening, and you know, there's a ton of points that I agree and don't disagree, and do disagree, sorry, and that, you know, I'm just going to try and plunk them out really quick, and then you can play with them. One is, you know, when I share the content of what we're speaking with a lot of other countries around the world, they don't know what we're talking about. And I question two things. Is it one, that we're either more conscious over here, or we're a lot more, you know, down the rabbit hole of bullshit? So that's something to think about. The next thing that concerns me is that I think it's short-sighted to assume that the spirit is separate from anything else going on. And the only reason I sit in that place now is merely because I've spent so much time in the quantum physics and the quantum biology and the science of it. The reason the medical system doesn't work is because it's a classical model. It can't see beyond physical. It's an impossibility, which is why I'm in quantum medicine, to be a quantum doctor. And we look at people from a very different perspective that says, well, we are like 90% outside of the physical body, as Nicole already mentioned. Mental, emotional, spiritual, bliss body, it all forms in that way, in simplicity. So I sit here and then I question, well, we're all here to do the spiritual thing. I don't spend much time in the mediumship anymore, but when I did do that, of course, I communicated with a lot of people on the other side and had very interesting experiences. Now, when I apply the quantum physics to it, then I start to understand why that was kind of working. But we can definitely say we're here for spiritual experience. And quite frankly, even this discussion to some degree is a moot point. It's like, does it matter or doesn't it matter? Like, do we care or don't we care? It doesn't really, it just doesn't matter, because we're just here to experience life anyway. So I have a hard time when I apply the science behind it, quantum science that is, that in any way, shape, or form, spirit is fucking things up to the point that people are confused in the physical body at this realm. That's just how I feel about it. Now, to the other side, though, I can stand on the other side and say, well, okay, since it's a spiritual experience, then spirit is purposely giving us this incredible opportunity to work through what exactly is going on so that we can change, for example, our medical system, waken people up to a quantum spiritual perspective so that we can get to the other side. And usually the only way that we're going to get there is that there's going to be a whole lot of hard knocks, because people clearly aren't waking up in a very easy fashion. So we have to start punching people in the head by making it very, very difficult, which is, you know, spirit's way from my experience. So I just think, you know, now is my just human, you know, masculine kind of not looking at the spirit so much. I'm in agreement with Nicole, and I say, well, quite frankly, if I look at the rest of the countries, I actually think it's an agenda to destroy Western culture, like we have in Rome and Greece and Egypt and so on and so forth, where we all ended up slowly becoming confused about gender, and all of these other things went right off the rails to the point that we couldn't maintain society anymore. That doesn't mean we're going to crash. I think it means it's an opportunity, as Michael has alluded to many times, an opportunity for us, say, more awakened at this time to not go down and crash as I think they're trying to, you know, place upon us. I have no doubts that people in the transgender community are experiencing exactly what they're experiencing. Where I live, my neighbors are homosexual. I get the opportunity to communicate with them. They're both manly men, but they're as feminine as it gets. It's just totally incredible. And so I don't sit there and go, oh, it's crazy, it doesn't make sense, spirit screw. Like, I don't have any of those thoughts. But I'll tell you what I do think. And if you go back and look at the research, probably the easiest one is to look at the research of Dr. Wallach, who is incredible in the area of animals, veterinarian medicine, sorry. All of these things happen when we have nutrient deficiencies and high toxicity. We're not seeing the same levels of these problems that we have here in North America, in Africa, in Asia, in other places. So you got to say, well, okay, again, there's the spirit, but, you know, it's easy when most of us have been in a mindset that the medical community is right, which I'll tell you right now, it's not, because it being limited by classical physics thinking, materialism, as they say. So they don't look at all of the other variables. If I know all of you out there are seeing at least stuff about 5G and EMF and GMOs and insecticides and pesticides and glyphosate, maybe if we took all of those into account, we would get some more clarity. I'm not saying, folks, I'm not saying that this isn't just a spiritual manifestation purely, and all of that other stuff is irrelevant. But I don't think that we're spending enough time looking at it. And to Nicole's point, I believe, just take the word agenda off the table. How about we just do it like this? There's so many egos and so many people adamant about not looking at other aspects behind what might possibly be causing this. Hey, if they could discover something that said, oh, you're all men because your mom ate too much beef, then ta-da, I wouldn't complain about it. I go, all right, sweetheart, we want girls, so you're not eating beef. Like, we wouldn't get all bent out of shape about this, but for some reason we do when it comes to transgenderism. So those are my points that I hope,
Yeah,
bring some ideas.
I don't believe, I know, Michael, that you say it's not as complicated as it is. And in some regards, I think you're right. But then in other regards, I think it is very complicated. And I think because we are all individuals and we're all having our own individual experience. And there are so many different levels going into each of our experiences that are contributing to our reality. So for instance, I think, I was reading a story from someone who, the reason why he wanted to transition into being a woman and thought that he was a woman is because he, as a little boy, was sexually abused by his uncle and molested and got beaten down by, I think, his dad. And he never saw women getting treated that way. And so for him to escape the beating, he thought, I need to become a woman. And that was his safe way. And so that was, for him, not the whole thing, but that was part of the experience of driving him to wanting to transition, which he later regretted. Now, I do see that there are people who do transition and actually, like Rebecca said, are living a very fulfilled life and they're very quite happy about it. There are also, like we talk about food and toxicity and how we're being bombarded with a lot of things now that are affecting our reality. I think, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, was it you who told me that you were reading something that says women who, when they're pregnant, who eat lots of chicken, that they've been able to now determine that it actually starts to affect the masculine DNA and actually emasculates the actual DNA through eating the extra chicken?
Yeah, I did read something about cell mutation and not only chicken, but other additives and things in our foods that are causing this.
Yeah, so there's so much going on, which I think lends to all the confusion because we're all trying to figure this out, right? We're all trying to figure this out. But I think the most important thing that we can do is to remember that we're all human, we all have hearts, we're all trying to do the best we can. And instead of trying to come at this as dehumanizing someone, but still being allowed to have these conversations so that we can understand what's going on as a society, because parts of it is this, darker agenda. But I also believe that the people who are going through this experience of transgenderism internally, who are having this experiencing and wanting to go through reassignment surgery, that they're here to teach us all of this, I have a certain level of respect for the souls who are going through this, because it's a very traumatic experience from what, just from the outside looking in, seems like, but they're here to teach us great valuable lessons here about the masculine and feminine energies. And so it is such a diverse conversation. There's so much to talk about here.
Yeah. I mean, again, it really is. It is extremely complicated, but it really is simple when you get down to it. The body is essentially trying to emulate and become what it thinks it is in its energetic head. And that's the struggle they live. And in trying to change the biology to what is internal, they find some peace. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, a struggle is a struggle is a struggle. Whether you have gender issues or you're just trying to have a marriage work with a partner within these energies, the struggles that we have create polarities that knock us off of this neutral foundation that we all need if we really want to understand this divine spiritual energy. If we never find this neutrality, this truly untriggerable, unpolarized, unchaotic state where one finds peace and serenity, they start getting their body in this neutral state and they're not triggered one way or the other, struggling. That is when the body is more receptive to receiving these divine energies that we keep talking about, but that is mostly elusive to us because we're in such unbalanced, chaotic states. And I think, you know, again, everything that we've talked about, we can just use it as a model. Look, allow it, just let it be. Experience the experiences that you're experiencing in this life for the lessons you have, but find a still point. Find a point to where you rise above all of the stress and the chaos and the issues that you're enduring, and you just observe it. You pull yourself out of the struggle, you pull yourself out of the stress, and you become a neutral observer, and you just allow it. And therein you'll find some peace, that maybe some trickle of some divine knowledge, some divine intelligence will begin to flow into you to give you a greater perspective to grow, to ascend in this life.
Well, let's go back to the rituals and what we're lacking here in a society based off of that idea of finding neutrality. Because some people get confused and think that means that they merge the masculine and feminine into one and lose the beautiful energies of each, which I don't believe is what we're wanting. I believe that we want to continue to honor the individual energies, but also allow them to dance and harmonize and merge within one another, and work with one another synergistically. So going back to this idea, since this is like a roundtable on union, I think for union to happen on a grand scale of collective here on Earth, we all have to start individually with our own union within self, and that kind of comes through with union of our own masculine and feminine energies. I think there's something to be said about this idea of missing these rituals of understanding these rites of passage from whether it's being a young girl into being a woman or a young boy into being a man. There's an element here where I can see that we're so disconnected from nature, and there seems to be a lot that nature can teach us just within our own sense of who we are on a masculine and feminine level. That, you know, Justin, when you were talking about this idea of send the boy into the cave and he stays there overnight by himself and he faces his, the darkness and the unknown and all of that. There's something to be said that maybe we as a society could be implementing these rituals back into for our boys and girls to experience as they're making a rite of passage into adulthood. Does anyone want to jump in on that, of these ideas?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I was actually going to bring this up as well. I think one of the things that we should consider is the role that culture plays and how we express our divine potentials and our biological inheritance. So from a biological standpoint, we have masculine and feminine. In order for the species to propagate, these two things have to come together to create children. And there's various animalistic instincts that have been built into our biology to allow that to happen. And what we notice looking at history and culture, so anthropologists and things like this, is that there seems to be roles that are built into culture to help facilitate that. And I think that's what part of these rites of initiation are. When we start to mess around with culture, and we start to destroy these roles cavalierly or without really understanding what they do, then fundamental bonds between men and women and people in general start to break down. A really good example of this is Japan. Japan has a very traditional society. Men and women have traditional roles that they were meant to embody for most of Japanese history, reaching back until around from the 800s all the way up till when the Rockefellers came in the 1850s. And, we can certainly debate whether that's oppressive or not. But the point is that when these cultural roles are well defined, what that does is it narrows the choice confines and it allows people to kind of know where they fit in society. And that's really important because these biological instincts to express our desire to copulate with another person, whether it's for lustful reasons, for love reasons, for spiritual reasons, they have to be expressed in a way. So we have this very hazy potential. That's, the spiritual energetic potential. It's this kind of nebulous. It could go anywhere, but it has to be downgraded and downstepped, or it has to be expressed in a form. So what I think is potentially problematic is that if we start making choices that mess around with these cultural roles without really understanding them, then we actually do a lot more harm than we do good, because your culture influences you tremendously, whether we like it or not. I mean, we are highly malleable beings from a developmental psychology perspective. Your parents particularly are some of the most influential people in your life insofar as determining your identity structure and how you're going to express yourself. And there's a whole lot of research and data to suggest that, depending on your parenting conditions and whatnot, then you're going to have different proclivities in your adult life. For example, if you have a very aloof father, somebody that you have to get a lot of attention from, make a lot of noise to get a lot of attention from, that tends to draw you to aloof people later in life, especially if you're a woman. So from a pair bonding kind of dating, mating perspective. So I think these roles are there for a reason. And to get back to what I was saying earlier, if we assume the answer to the question that we do have a nature and we should learn to embrace it to live the most fulfilled life is yes, then can we also ask the question that maybe some of the traditions and cultures that have been expressing themselves all throughout history have something to teach us? And I think the answer is yes. And, the danger I see to exalting and heralding and making reverentiable the kind of gender fluid idea is that it ripples out in society. So from an ethical and a lawful perspective, everybody has the right to do what they want with their own body. So I'm not making any claims that if you, as a man or a woman, decide you want to be another gender, that you shouldn't do that and it's inherently criminal. No, not at all. However, your choice does affect the rest of the world in a social situation. And those choices now are being upheld as this kind of, monolithic goal to strive towards. One of the things that I've heard in the spiritual community from several people is that, this emergence of transgenderism is actually reflective of these ascended energies because we're supposed to be androgynous. And it's actually people trying to align more with an androgynous way of being. That certainly might be the case, but I would argue that if you're trying to reject your own nature to embrace another gender, then that's not in harmony with what I would describe as a spiritually enlightened perspective or methodology. So, to kind of get it boots on the ground a little bit here, in just a practical human sense, I think there's a reason why a lot of cultures have dating rights and initiation rights to take children who are going through puberty and kind of show them how to be men and women in various cultural forms. Because if you don't do that, then these base instincts don't have a way to express themselves in an ethical or socially acceptable way. And then that creates a lot of division and confusion. A really good example of that is Japan. Japan, like I said, was a very traditional culture for most of its history. In the 1850s, the Rockefellers and the British came in and they decided to kind of radically reform the culture. And now 150 years later, after these things have really taken hold, we have a massive fertility crisis and intimacy crisis in Japan, where believe it's 30% of children or adults between the ages of 22 and 35 have absolutely no interest in sex whatsoever. And there's literally a population collapse happening. And that is carrying over into other aspects of the Western world. So, you know, even though we tend to, in some circles anyway, we tend to say culture is this ultimate evil, and we just have to tear it down and go back to this like kumbaya place where we're just living completely in the land and we are just totally informed by the divine. I think that's a little bit myopic. And I think, you know, we as individuals, we are living in a co-creative reality. Part of the legacy we leave for other people around us is the choices that we choose to act on in our lives. And those choices create culture. And then that culture becomes the womb in which other individuals be born into. And we really should be careful about that and ask these hard questions to see what kind of world we're creating.
Yeah, and what you're talking about there is perfect example of losing the masculine energy within a culture where people just want it to be a free-for-all of just, let's just go with the flow and figure it all out, where that may sound very nice, but you're completely disregarding the masculine aspect of providing structure, providing some sort of direction forward. So how do we find that balance as a society where we don't take away this idea of having structure and ideas that hold us together and allow the feminine to do her thing, you know, to explore and create and all of that. So it's interesting. Like for me, as someone who wants to be a mother, you know, one day, I think about how this impacts my children and how they will be raised in society and how they will go forward understanding, you know, who they are and adjusting into the world. And I think about how awesome it would be to have these rituals come back and how amazing it would be to have some of these. And I know that we, you know, and I think a very basic ritual here is when we think about like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and, you know, like but now they want to merge them together and not have them separate. And I think that's wrong. Well, I shouldn't say that's wrong. I don't think it's smart because while you could have some sort of integration, I do think, and I think we talked about this in the Divine Masculine or maybe Justin, it was when you were on our podcast, that it's important that the masculine or men have their own time with just men and women have their own time with just women, but then also have this ability to integrate as well. So taking that away doesn't allow one to really truly immerse themselves in that identity of male and female.
Yeah, if I can just add one more point to that, I think I study a lot of pair bonding, and one of the projects I have is I want to help restore the human family. And so I'm studying everything that goes with that, whether it's psychology or, you know, spirituality, traditions. And one of the things I'm studying is sex and how sex actually occurs. One of the interesting things is that even within, you know, a homosexual relationship, let's say, you have these masculine and feminine roles. You know, in the gay community, you have tops and bottoms. You have the traditional masculine role, and then you have the traditional feminine role. And what's interesting is they can, not always, but they can actually take on a cultural bent to them. You know, a more effeminate man who's the receiving party will tend to be more feminine, where the masculine man who's in the, you know, giving can be more masculine. So everywhere we look, these roles tend to play out. And what's interesting is from a satisfaction perspective, and this is where the arena of sexuality is a really rich place to look to answer these questions, I feel like, because in sexuality, we have a blend of the spiritual, the psychological, the cultural, and the biological. So we have all these things playing out at once. And the end result is, did you get off? Did you have a fun time or not? So it's a pretty good way to figure out what the answer is. And if you try to remove these roles, if you try to remove the masculine and feminine, then the actual satisfaction decreases profoundly. If you add those back in and you encourage people to embody those roles, then the actual satisfaction goes up tremendously. So right here, this is again getting back to the whole nature question, if we just embody these nature aspects, then if we see, from a epistemological perspective, how do you know if something is true? Well, from a pragmatic perspective, if you got an idea in your head and you act on it and it actually creates the result that you wanted, then it's usually a good clue that you're on the right track. It's not a definite proof, but you're on the right track somewhere. So I think from that perspective, there's a lot to be learned there.
I think one of the questions that someone would ask then is, how do I know what's naturally inherent in me? Because there is so much confusion right now. And so this is one of the questions that's coming up a lot is, what is naturally inherent in me? Ben?
Well, in that case, it comes back to what Michael has said numerous times, and that's going to one's inner self and seeing what is it that I'm wanting, and listen to that. It's really unfortunate. I'm not really I don't personally get how people are so easily persuaded by the society of marketing and media and stuff. I'm not. But so, simple things: turn off the TV, shut off your social media, and spend a whole whack of time with yourself, and you start to find those answers, really, truly. And I like the rite of passage idea, because it helps young men and women know where their next place is. Well, I mean, we're all on this journey, and we don't know what the next steps are. So the least we could do as parents and sages, as we're supposed to have become at some point in our society, which I'm not sure how many sages there are anymore here, but we should be handing down that what do you call them, little keys, I guess you could say, to moving forward in the world. I like what Justin's doing in terms of bringing the family together again. I couldn't agree more, because you especially see this in the Black community in the USA, where there's been a lot of separation of the masculine from the family. And then you can see the breakdown that occurred as a result of that, which didn't exist before that. So you can just kind of look at the data, and even, maybe some of it's speculation at this moment, but, you can see it in the data that those are really important things. And yeah, I wanted to make a comment as well to the pair bonding thing about what I had noticed as well, that it's also not just having masculine and feminine, but it's actually having a certain element of necessary polar energy. So when you've got a partner who's a lot more like you, I mean, or less of that, in my case, if they're less feminine, then yeah, there's a lot less of what I would almost refer to as kinetic energy, that, that real spark. And I'm sure everyone on this podcast has had the experience to be in the room with someone else that just, lights them up, like, they would kill everyone in the way to get to that other person. So those are the things to listen for. That's why I bring it up. Those are the things to listen for. Is that your nature? And yeah, I don't know if that nature inside you says, you're a man, and it says, oh my God, that guy over there is like yummy, then I guess, maybe you need to look into that and see what that means, and maybe, communicate in that direction. But I don't think that we should be, again, to repeat something that's been said often, I don't think we should be looking outside for those answers. Now, I know people go, oh, what the hell does that mean? Well, I sit in my head and it's just, I don't know what's going on. I get it. It's not easy for most people. But at some point, and I think it's a beautiful opportunity if people can give themselves a 1-week silent retreat. No technology, nothing. It's an incredible opportunity, because you'll be quite surprised the stuff that comes up, and eventually the monkey brain will quiet, and the dawn or the sunset will rise, and more of what Michael said, that divine inspiration does sort of show up with more clarity, and that's very helpful. And that's all I have to say about that.
You know, the stillest waters have the greatest clarity.
Yep, got to get rid of those distractions because they're causing too many ripples in that water.
Yeah, and my gosh, I mean, you know, this entire discussion is all linear thinking, analytical, in the head. And you know, it's funny. I mean, that's where we spark lessons. You know, we dance around with all this energetic polarity, and we discuss all of this crazy stuff analytically in our head. And we can do this infinitely. And it's for a reason, so that we learn our lessons. But there's going to come a time that maybe we need to go deeper. Maybe we need to go within, as Ben was saying. And, you know, the energetic, our body is simply a transmitter. You know, you have all these chakras, these energy centers. You know, the heart, going to the heart, placing all of your concentration, your thought, and your energy in your heart center. And you be still, and you let those waters clear. That's where you tap into infinite intelligence, the divine, that most of us are cut off from because we don't do that. And if we did that more often, we wouldn't have to sit around and go back and forth on all of these different polarity of discussions. We just know.
Mm-hmm. And it can come to you in, you know, it doesn't mean you have to be in meditation for the answers to come to you. I know there are many times when I decided to, you know, really embark on my spiritual journey to the depths of where I've taken it now, where I remember many times in yoga, because I was uniting mind and body together through the breath, which is like spirit. And that's uniting the masculine and feminine together. And really, I remember so many times where I would receive answers to questions from years ago. And I was like, and it's just like a light bulb would come on, and the answer would be so simple and so profound, it would rock me to tears. I just, you know, the gentle tears that just come out because it was so easy, but all I needed to do was connect and go within. And oftentimes it doesn't come when you're trying to search for it. It comes when you let go, knowing that you've put the intention to perhaps ask a question, put that intention out, but not so much that you're seeking the answer through different things, but allowing it to come through. I think that's one of the things that we as a society, obviously through the distractions of television and music and social media and all the things that, you know, get our monkey mind active, are distracting us from. And you could do it. You could be simply by taking those distractions away. There are times where I've just been in the shower and all of a sudden an answer comes to me. Water's a great conductor of energy. You know, being in nature, you're more likely to receive answers because of the frequency and just allowing yourself to actually connect with what is inherently so much part of you, but you've cut yourself off from. These are the things that we can do. Now, one last thing, because this comes up, this is a question that I received, was what are some of the shifts that one would experience on a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual level, doesn't matter, but what are some of the shifts that someone might experience when they're integrating their masculine and feminine energies into union? Does anyone want to share maybe their own experiences or things that are kind of coming up to them right now?
Well, again, I'll comment and I'll let others step in. It's all about addressing it and balancing it. It's taking whatever polarity of stuff you're going through. It's going to be different for anybody, and just finding a neutrality between all of the chaos, finding that neutral point that will allow your state of body to reach what they talk about, this 0 point. You know, what the hell is that? It's a neutrality, it's a stillness that the body requires to tap into all of the spiritual stuff we're talking about. And if you don't find that, you're not going to be tapped into this higher realm. You're going to be stuck in this little chaotic biological body, living your messy, chaotic lessons. You know, it's find the still point, find the neutrality, somehow or another, balance of it. Because if you're not balanced, you're going to be knocked off one way or the other, and you're going to be stressed. You're going to be stuck in the analytical mind trying to figure stuff out, because you're just not, just allow it to be still, put your body in an energetic state to maybe experience some things you've never been able to experience. And you may find more answers there than you would ever imagine, I think.
Yeah, like for me, I know that through my own journey with the masculine and feminine energies of myself, that I've noticed some of the shifts that I've noticed is that as I integrate more of allowing myself to be more receptive through my feminine energy, allowing my intuition to come in more and trust my intuition, allow it to guide me, the more that I allow myself to nurture myself and not demand so much of my body, but then also bring in the structure of the masculine into my day-to-day, giving myself some sort of structure, whether it's a timeline to abide by, or maybe there's a certain few things I want to get done and I need to create a list, whatever that is. Also feeding my mind with more information, so making sure I'm reading things, that I'm also building my logical mind. I've noticed the shifts that I've noticed for me is that I have much more healthy and balanced relationships in my life than I've had previously. So it's showing up that as I create that balance within me, I'm finding that it's expressing itself in my external reality through healthier relationships, whether it's with my family, whether it's with friends or romantic partners. I'm starting to also notice a pull towards nature more so. And I find, and this isn't anything against, if you want to live in a city, like, all the power to you, but as someone who was a city girl, I find myself less and less wanting to be in the city structure because I find it too chaotic for me, and I want to connect more with nature. I find that has been a shift I've noticed for myself. What about anyone else?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. I want to say to people who are newly awakening and maybe watching this show, like, if you feel like you're in an unknown territory at the helm of your life with no map, then that's probably perfect. That's just where you need to be. Because all of my best transitions, or my best movements and progression deeper into spirit and into the world of my own life, happen from that place when I'm letting go of all my concepts, even just for a moment. Like right now, bringing it back to like the social media fast. I have not been on social media, I think, for 6 weeks and going, and it's always a very beautiful opening. I always do that to come back in. It's a retreat of sorts, and that always helps me. But I like what you said, Nicole, about like bringing in the clear energies of structure along with the listening and the intuition. That's more of what I'm working with, is that interplay. But it's can be a real messy dance, and you'll feel maybe like clunky at first, and maybe you don't know what it is, and it's in the heart, it's in that mystery space, grounded here, right here in this realm. So it's always ongoing for me. But I give everybody a thumbs up who even for a day, if you shut off the techno for a while and tune in to you, that's a real gift.
Lisa?
I think the most important thing is what Michael was talking about, is just really going into self and finding that balance. And for me, to be perfectly honest, I haven't ever really thought of things as far as like this is my masculine or this is my feminine until really recently. And I guess the biggest, I feel like I am missing some of, I could do a better job in balancing myself with some more masculine. But for me, that really just is more about boundaries than it is about anything else. It's more about focusing on what's important to me, and rather than being so stuck in this nurturing role that I have been my entire life. So finding that balance for me is more about just really focusing, having those boundaries and letting those be known in my relationships.
And as you like start to integrate more of the masculine energy, what are you starting to notice?
Just that really, that I'm more self-focused. Like before, for me, it was all about, is everybody else taken care of? And I was last on that list. And now I've put myself first. So I feel like that's where the balance is coming for me, where I am putting myself first and everybody else comes next. And I haven't lost that nurturing aspect of myself, but it's just not the most important thing to me. Isn't to tend to everyone else. It's to take that and do it with myself, to nurture myself.
Yeah. I mean, Lisa, you're dead on there. And I think a lot of the population is missing that. There's, again, if folks are knocked off their foundation, they're polarized, they're not thinking straight. So many people think that they have to find love outside themselves to complete themselves and have them feel love. And what I've learned is, look, if you don't love yourself, you're never going to be able to properly love another. You've got to surrender to yourself, love yourself, give for yourself, fill your cup. And only until then will it overflow and in some way maybe properly give the love that somebody else might be seeking from you. And that hints to, again, the heart center, that this infinite knowledge, the infinite universe, the spirit comes through the heart. You've got to submit. You've got to surrender and love yourself. You've got to be in that state of love that affects your entire energetic vibration, that changes your entire world, that new things will come to you that you've never known. I mean, I know this intimately because I spent my life not knowing any of this stuff. I had an overnight awakening that just poured into me, where just less than 3 years ago, I didn't know anything we're talking about. Nothing. I was completely cut off. I was walled. I was analytical in the mind, cut off from the heart. And, I was struck by lightning, divine spirit activated my heart. Nicole, you talked about this in one of your episodes. And my entire life has changed now to this heart-centered, this love. And that has opened up an entire world I didn't even know existed.
I think you're absolutely right that the masculine and the feminine are integrated through your heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this idea of, receiving versus giving, nurturing versus, supporting. It's interesting because I like to give real life examples. So it gives some people who are watching like really tangible stuff to grab onto that maybe they might be able to relate to and understand what's happening through them. But for me, as a woman who really heavily was in my masculine for a lot, it showed up in many ways in the sense of how I was very athletic, but not just athletic in a sense of, oh, if you're in your feminine, you can't be athletic, but overly like in my athletics. So I was constantly pushing my body, always taking it to the extreme. I always could do better and push there were bigger and better weights I could lift. Could I run for 2 hours? It was, if I wasn't playing like 4 sports at the same time, like it was, and then I go to this experience where I'm finally starting to reconnect with my feminine energy. And I go on this kind of 1-year hiatus and I learn about yoga. And I start to realize, wow, I've just been taking and taking and taking from my body and not giving back to it and nurturing it. And so one of the things that really started to happen is I started to find this balance. And now in my workouts, I always make sure that there's a balance in there where I'll work out, but I'll never take it to the extreme where I used to, where I really would push myself. It's unnecessary from my perspective. I go, it's just unnecessary. I'm not competing like some world-class athlete. I'm just living my day-to-day life, and I want to be healthy. And so that's one thing that really started to change. Also, the way I ate started to change, where I always thought I had to go to these extremes and do, like I couldn't eat carbs, or I couldn't, I needed to do no meat, or, like whatever it is. I'm starting to see that I'm finding this balance, and I'm just allowing my body to show up and listen to what my body needs, but also still maintain this idea of knowing what logically is good for me, and having this idea of knowledge and wisdom that's coming through the data that's presented to us in our real world. So these are some of like really basic things that you start to realize as you go through this shift of connecting with your masculine and feminine energy, how that starts to shift your reality and how you show up in the world. Justin, what are some of the things that you've noticed in your life?
I would say, to put it simply, and then I'll kind of dig into what I'm going to say, is that it's your capacity to accept what is increases. So you're the truth that's swimming all around you. You can just accept it more, and I think that is a sign of maturity. So from a spiritual maturity perspective, I would say, you can be deceived into thinking that if you hear a truth you don't like hearing, that you can reject it and you'll be okay. But that's not the way reality works. We have to contend with the truth. You have to accept reality. And if you don't, then it hurts you. So one of the things that I found that's really interesting, and this is actually bears itself out in the psychology neurologically. And I was trying to figure out a few years ago, why is it that God is always referred to as masculine? And, the standard answer is, well, it's because of the patriarchy, and, men just ruled the world, and that's why they labeled God as masculine. And maybe that's true, I don't know. But from the discussion of the principle of gender perspective, the truth is constantly pressing down upon us. And when we allow the truth to enter our mind, it creates things, it creates knowledge. So from a psychological perspective, you have the right and the left brain. Your right brain is really important in allowing you to explore and understand the unknown. And then when you allow that process to happen, when you allow yourself to be in love with your experience, you're open and receptive from a heart-centered space, then you're allowing all the truth that's in your experience to become articulated in your mind. That actually creates structures in the left brain, which is masculine. So if you think about it, the truth is a masculine force with respect to our relationship to it, because we are receiving the truth, just like the sperm receives the egg to create something. And then what ends up being created is the left brain, or the masculine brain. And these two things work together to create who we are. So one of the things I've noticed is just simply my ability to accept reality as it is and allow the transformative power of truth to work its magic increases. And I spent many years of my life just like fighting reality tooth and nail in a lot of different ways. And when I woke up in 2010, I started to kind of get on the other side of that. I started to develop what I call spiritual maturity. And the more and more you allow yourself to just simply accept the truth and explore the ideas that you've labeled as, well, I don't want to believe this to be true because it doesn't jive with my belief system, it doesn't jive with the way of life I want to have, then you actually develop a greater capacity to live a more rewarding, fulfilling life, I think. So I would say, when you embrace the masculine and feminine within you from a divine sense, then you really are stepping into what I would call a kind of divine blueprint, because who you are meant to be, the lessons you were meant to live out in this life require you to be receptive to reality and the truth. And the more you do that, the more you make life better, and you live a more fulfilling life, and you can contribute positively to the world.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I totally understand that idea of like the truth pressing down on you, and the more you resist it, the more it persists into your reality.
It does.
Ben, what about you?
It's probably all of what you've said, but the biggest awakening for me, more than anything, because I went through a good portion of life being just sort of confused about why I felt so different in the world. And then about 12 years ago, then I got diagnosed with advanced stage cancer. So that pulled me out very quickly from, I think I was more balanced up until about 25. And then I jumped into the world of like, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So I went hardcore masculine in everything. And yeah, then the cancer came, and that sort of hit me back in the other direction in a very, very dramatic way, that I was like, okay, well, I need to, you know, nurture, and I need to relax, and I need to spend more quiet time. And I dove, you know, full force into some really far out metaphysics. And then I started, you know, then the medium stuff turned on even more than it had been before. It was just like, oh, these are weird coincidences. And then that really turned on. And I have to admit, I kind of swung. I went to the other direction, more in the feminine, to the point that it was like, you know, it was, well, from a masculine perspective anyway, it seemed somewhat chaotic, and just sort of like, I don't like to use the word crazy, but from a very logical standpoint, there was a lot going on that just was like, wow, this is really far out. And then it sort of started to come back. And I've always used the mirrors as my guidepost. What does my reality show me? What's going on at this time? What are people saying about me or to me? Or, you know, and picking up on those hints, I've slipped a little bit, admittedly, a little bit more into the masculine again because of this deep diving into the science. And quite frankly, I don't love it that much, but it's a requirement. And so it forces me to become a little bit more like that again. But quite frankly, I tend to be more the type that's like, hey, you're not going to believe it. I was out and about, and like 3 total strangers said the following, you know, and then I take that and I go, that's spirit telling me something. And that's assuming I haven't been quiet and listening to myself. And spirit goes outside and says, well, he's being a dude again, so I better show him out there what's going on. So I think all of those little pieces are the way that I look at where I am in the moment. And I just let things be. It just you know, I know if I need to be creative, I need to tap into my feminine and go full force. And quite frankly, I don't like being over masculine all the time, because it's kind of a drag, and it's very limiting, quite frankly. Necessary but limiting.
Necessary but limiting. There you go. That's a great way of stating it. And you know, I think that's just our nature. We the pendulum, you know, one of the things that was shown to me is this idea of understanding that we're constantly, you know, just like with the energies, expanding and contracting. And so we are, when we're expanding, we're exploring, we're looking all out there, and then we have to contract and bring it in and process it and assimilate it and see how it works in our actual real life. And then we get to go out and explore more and like go all out there. And so it's just the ebb and flow of life. It's just how energy is. And you know, as we go, maybe we'll go over to the yang side and explore more of our masculine energy. As we do that, we'll be drawn naturally to go over to the feminine side. And if we're not naturally drawn there, spirit will take us over there in some way, like with your instance with the cancer. And so it all tends to work itself out, but the more aware you are of it, the more likely you're to have a less rocky of a ride, in a sense that you kind of have some idea of what's going on. It gives you a little bit of context. And I think that's what's so great about these discussions is that we're giving people some context to put into their own lives of what's actually happening, and talking about the feminine energies and what those are, and talking about the masculine energies and how that presents itself in their reality, and how that presents it just in their own internal world, I think is really helpful for people, because it's been taken out, and then now we have all this confusion going on, and people don't understand why they're doing this or why they're doing that. And as soon as you start to put some structure, some masculine structure around there, but then also talk about the beautiful, intuitive, and explorative nature of the feminine, I just feel like it gives people like guideposts and markers along the path to kind of, help them on their own personal journey.
Yeah, the Beatles had a concept, let it be. Experience the emotions that you're here to experience, explore them, feel them to the depths of your being. Allow them, experience them, learn from them, heal from them, and that's where your lessons are. Most of our life, we're in this analytical part of our head trying to figure all of these things out, learning the messy lessons. But there's going to come a time when you're going to finally get to a state to where you finally found some things that you love. Your body shifts. You start thinking and feeling from this heart center of just love, and your entire world can change. That's how you tap into the spirit that most of us are cut off from, because we're knocked off our foundation. We're living our messy lessons on our own accord, or because we're manipulated off of that foundation. But the messy lessons are in the analytical brain, the linear thinking, the abundance, the love, the joy, the compassion that one can have to go out to others comes from the heart. That's where you completely change your energetic state of being. I say this and I laugh about it. I heard all these years about you got to raise your vibration, and it's like, what the hell is that? Again, but it's true. Your energetic body has a state of frequency, a state of vibration. It's either chaotic or it's peaceful, still, and loving. And depending on what energetic state you choose to put yourself in will dictate your experiences.
And it's necessary to go into chaos just as much as it's necessary to go into stillness. Those are great little words of wisdom. In fact, let's end on that. We've heard from Michael some beautiful words of wisdom. Lisa, what would you like to leave the audience with? Any wisdom from yourself? Your mic's muted.
Sorry about that. Beautiful words of wisdom. I am so in line with what you're talking about, Michael. It's just really, for me right now, I believe that focusing on yourself and loving yourself is the most important thing. And I know that those words, loving yourself, can be so ambiguous. It's just like, what the fuck does that even mean? And I know it's really hard, but I feel like I've discovered lately that what it really means is tending to your inner child. And I think your inner child is the key to opening up your heart. It's the key to merging your divine masculine and your divine feminine. And it's really the key to everything. And if you just turn within and you start really tending to that inner child within you, then you're going to start seeing really big shifts in your life.
Beautiful. Rebecca?
Fear is part of the journey that keeps coming up. You will face fear in the chamber of miracles and going back into that womb space where you're, in a sense, birthing yourself anew from whatever, you know, we've been taught into your, you know, fidelity to your own highest life. There's fear, and that's the teacher. And everything that emerges. And in my situation, I know as a teacher, so, and there's so much beauty and love, and everything everybody has said and contributed is so right here, just very resonant. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
Absolutely agree with what has been said. I'm going to put this in that I think conversations like what we've had today are necessary. And the reason I believe they're necessary is because if we are not having them and we're only going within, we are like the guru who sits in the middle of India with poverty and chaos all around them. And that's fine to disconnect, but we are in 3D reality. We are co-creating with the other humans on this journey. And I feel it's necessary for us to do both, as you said, go into that peaceful place, but go into that quote unquote chaos to create growth and to bring conversations like this into the fray so that other people can start to actually get to even what we're talking about. I mean, again, there'll be people who go, I'm going to send this out again to a lot of different people. And I ask them, well, what did you think? Or did you get it? I didn't really understand. That's okay. We're planting seeds. At some point, they will get it. And in a very non-egoic way, there are many of us that are way showers, and we have to take that responsibility as a very important thing for us to do at this juncture and continue to do what we're doing.
Thank you. Very wise words. Thank you, Ben. And Justin?
One thing I've really embraced recently is having faith in the goodness of all things. That despite all the chaos and uncertainty that's happening all around you, that there really is a direction, a kind of eternal purpose behind everything. And, you know, we're finite creatures in a human and earthly sense. Our knowledge is limited. We know what we know about ourselves is even less, or, you know, arguably less. So one of the things I kind of come back to a lot is if you can just develop a healthy relationship with the unknown and allow yourself to have faith in your own ability to deal with the unknown and believe in your own greatness, that whatever is happening in the cauldron of your own experience is going to help you, lead you to some type of benevolent end and something beneficial. I think it actually does prepare your mind and consciousness for the wisdom that's actually pouring in through your experience. So, and I think that gives you the sure foundation in your soul, in your life, and your beingness to handle any challenge. So having faith in the goodness of all things and really trusting in what's happening around you and looking for those opportunities where you can become a better person, become a more wise person, more serviceable to yourself and others, I think is a really good way to lead your life in a positive and productive way and leave a good impact on the world. So there you have it.
Very much so. And I just want to leave everyone with this idea that you don't need to go on some long sabbatical to find the answers you need. Your teachers are in your everyday, they're in your day-to-day experiences, they're in your family, they're in your friends, they're in the simple way the wind's blowing through the trees. As long as you're present and you're aware, you're going to find a lot of answers out there. And I think it's just a matter of tuning in and allowing yourself to be receptive to that, and then allowing yourself to not have fear take over and not take action on some of those new pieces of knowledge that you receive. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, Rebecca, Ben, Justin, Michael. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all your wisdom. This was wonderful. And I really appreciate you guys sharing and donating your time to help others and do this with me. So thank you very much. And lots of love to everyone who's watching this video. If you would like to watch the Divine Masculine and the Divine Feminine, all those links will be in the description below. As well, I will leave all the contact information for all of the guests here today. If you want to reach out to them or follow their work, all of those links will be down below. Thank you so much.